Narrator, ever been singled out, made to feel small, questioned despite everything you've achieved? Imagine that, but with the lives of hundreds of people hanging in the balance. This is the shocking story of Dr. Evelyn Hayes, a brilliant black aerospace engineer who faced humiliating suspicion at the boarding gate. Little did they know, she wasn't just any passenger. She was their director of aviation safety. And what she did next didn't just ground a flight. It sent shockwaves through an entire airline, exposing a dangerous undercurrent of prejudice and ultimately delivering a dose of karma so hard it would change everything. Buckle up. Dr. Evelyn Hayes, her mind still parsing the complex schematics of the new winglet modifications for the airline's A350 fleet, adjusted the strap of her leather satchel. Inside, alongside her tablet containing proprietary safety protocols, lay the latest report from the FAA on turbulence modeling. She was en route from Washington Dulles IAD to San Francisco SFO for a critical final audit of Global Air's West Coast maintenance hub. The flight GA303 was scheduled to depart in 45 minutes. Evelyn, 42, held a PhD in aerospace engineering from MIT and had spent 15 years designing, testing, and ensuring the safety of commercial aircraft before being headhunted by Global Air to become their youngest ever director of aviation safety and engineering oversight. Her appointment a year prior had been lauded in industry circles, though it hadn't been without its subtle undercurrents of surprise in some of the more traditional boardrooms. She was, after all, a black woman in a field still overwhelmingly dominated by white men. She approached the priority boarding lane for gate B42, her expression calm and professional. She presented her first-class boarding pass and her driver's license to the gate agent, a woman with sharply drawn eyebrows and a name tag that read, Brenda Jenkins. Brenda glanced at the boarding pass, then at Evelyn, then back at the boarding pass. Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "This is a first-class ticket, ma'am," she stated, her tone flat, almost accusatory. Evelyn offered a polite smile. "Yes, it is." Brenda's gaze flickered over Evelyn's attire, a tailored navy pantsuit, elegant but understated practical for travel. "And this ID matches—" She held it up, angling it towards the light, as if expecting it to reveal some hidden forgery. "It does. Is there a problem?" Evelyn kept her voice, even though a familiar prickle of annoyance, honed by years of similar micro-invalidations, began to surface. "We've had some issues recently. Just need to be thorough." Brenda said, her voice carrying a distinct implication that Evelyn was the issue. She tapped a few keys on her terminal, her eyes darting between the screen and Evelyn. "What's the purpose of your travel to San Francisco, ma'am?" Evelyn paused. This was unusual. Boarding agents didn't typically interrogate passengers about their travel purpose, especially not in the priority lane. "I'm traveling for business," she replied, her politeness now tinged with a firmer edge. "What kind of business?" Brenda pressed, her lips pursed. A small queue was forming behind Evelyn, and a few heads were starting to turn. "I work for Global Air. My business is with the airline," Evelyn stated, hoping to end the unnecessary questioning. This seemed to embolden Brenda. "Oh, you work for the airline in what capacity?" "Cabin crew. Maybe ground staff." There was a smirk playing on her lips, now a clear assumption that a black woman couldn't possibly hold a significant role. Evelyn felt a flush of anger, but she suppressed it. Losing her composure would achieve nothing. "My role is in corporate, based out of headquarters," she said, her voice dropping a decibel, carrying an unmistakable weight of authority that Brenda, in her prejudice-fueled myopia, failed to recognize. "Corporate, huh?" Brenda drawled, now clearly enjoying the attention she was drawing. She picked up the internal phone. "I'm just going to need to verify a few things. Step aside, please, ma'am. We need to keep the line moving." She gestured dismissively to an empty space beside the counter. The implication being that Evelyn was a potential problem, a fraud. Humiliation washed over Evelyn, hot and sharp. She was being profiled plain and simple. Passengers behind her were now openly staring, some with curiosity, others with impatience. Her years of dedication, her expertise, her position, all seemingly erased by the color of her skin in the eyes of this one gate agent. "Step aside," Evelyn repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "Agent Jenkins, are you refusing to board me? I'm ensuring the safety and security of this flight," Brenda retorted, puffing up slightly. "Airline policy. We have the right to ask questions. And if you're going to be uncooperative..." Evelyn's mind raced. This wasn't just an insult. It was a procedural breach. If an agent was this willing to overstep what other corners were being cut. What was the prevailing culture at this station if this behavior was deemed acceptable? A chill ran down her spine, far colder than the manufactured air of the terminal. This gate agent's attitude could be symptomatic of a deeper malaise, a laxity that had no place in an industry where safety was paramount. She took a deep breath. "Agent Jenkins," Evelyn began, her voice now devoid of any warmth, replaced by a steely command that made several nearby passengers instinctively straighten up. "I am Dr. Evelyn Hayes. My employee number is EA047. I am the Director of Aviation Safety and Engineering Oversight for Global Air. The purpose of my travel is the final safety and compliance audit of the SFO maintenance facility, an audit that includes a review of your station's adherence to security and passenger handling protocols." Brenda's smirk froze. Her face, which had been a mask of smug superiority, began to pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The phone receiver, which she had picked up with such confidence, now seemed to tremble in her hand. Evelyn continued, her gaze unwavering. "Your conduct in the last 5 minutes has raised serious concerns. Not only have you engaged in what appears to be profiling, but you've also demonstrated a profound misunderstanding of appropriate security, questioning, thereby creating an unnecessary spectacle and causing distress to a passenger, who in this instance happens to be your superior, responsible for the safety of this entire airline." The silence around the gate was absolute. Even the ambient chatter of the terminal seemed to have receded. Evelyn wasn't finished. "Given your behavior and the potential implications for procedural integrity at this gate, I am not confident that all pre-flight checks and passenger manifest verifications have been conducted with the diligence required by FAA and global air regulations." She looked past Brenda to the other gate agent, who was staring aghast. Then she looked at the waiting aircraft, visible through the large window, its sleek fuselage promising a journey that now felt tainted. "Therefore," Dr. Evelyn Hayes declared, her voice ringing with an authority that no one dared question, "as the Director of Aviation Safety for Global Air, exercising my prerogative under Section 7, Subsection B of the Global Air Operational Safety Mandate, I am officially suspending the boarding of Flight GA303. This aircraft will not depart until I have personally verified all gate procedures and spoken with the station manager, the captain, and the first officer. Agent Jenkins, you will remain here. Do not touch your terminal any further." Brenda Jenkins looked like she'd seen a ghost. The color had drained completely from her face, leaving behind a pasty, mottled complexion. Her jaw worked silently. The once smug gate agent was now a picture of dawning horror, The other agent, a younger man, immediately looked towards Evelyn, his expression a mixture of shock and deference. Evelyn pulled out her phone. "I'll be making some calls now. Please inform the passengers. There will be a delay." The drama had just begun. The announcement of a delay, initially vague, rippled through the waiting passengers. Groans and sighs erupted. Business travelers checked their watches with increasing agitation. Leisure passengers exchanged worried glances. Evelyn, meanwhile, had already placed a call to Marcus Thorne, Global Air's Vice President of Operations, her direct superior on the corporate ladder. "Marcus," she said, her voice calm but firm, cutting through the surprised silence on the other end of the line. "Evelyn Hayes. I'm at Dulles Gate B42, flight GA303 to San Francisco. I've had to suspend boarding." "Suspended, Evelyn? What on earth happened? A mechanical issue? Security threat?" Thorne's voice was sharp with concern. Unscheduled delays, especially those initiated by the safety director, were costly and usually indicative of severe problems. A gate security and procedural integrity issue. "Marcus," Evelyn explained succinctly, outlining Brenda Jenkins's behavior, the profiling, the inappropriate questioning, and her subsequent decision. "If this is the standard of professionalism and adherence to protocol at this gate, I can't in good conscience allow this flight to depart without a thorough review. It speaks to a potential systemic issue that could have far-reaching safety implications beyond just passenger interaction." There was a pause. Thorne knew Evelyn. She was not prone to exaggeration or emotional decision-making. Her judgment was meticulous, her dedication to safety absolute. "Understood, Evelyn. This is highly irregular and deeply concerning. What do you need?" "I need the station manager, Mr. Henderson, here immediately. I also want to speak with the flight crew. Captain Rostova, I believe, and I'll require access to the gate logs and CCTV footage for the last hour." "Done. Henderson should be paged now. I'll contact crew scheduling to ensure the captain is aware and cooperates fully. Keep me appraised." "Will do, Marcus." Evelyn hung up and turned her attention back to the gate. Brenda Jenkins was still standing frozen, a statue of disbelief. The other agent, whose name tag read Tim, was attempting to placate a few irate first-class passengers who had been first in line. "Mr. Henderson is on his way," Evelyn informed Tim, who nodded gratefully. "In the meantime, please ensure Agent Jenkins does not leave this area or interact with any systems." Tim, clearly out of his depth, but recognizing the gravity of the situation, just nodded again. "Yes, Dr. Hayes." Within minutes, a harried-looking man in a slightly crumpled suit, David Henderson, the Dulles station manager for Global Air, hurried towards the gate. His eyes darted from Evelyn, whom he didn't recognize, to the distressed Brenda, then to the growing crowd of impatient passengers. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice tight with stress. "I was told boarding was suspended for GA303. Evelyn stepped forward. "Mr. Henderson, I am Dr. Evelyn Hayes, Director of Aviation Safety for Global Air." She extended her hand. Henderson's eyes widened as he shook her hand, his demeanor instantly shifting from confrontational to concerned. "Dr. Hayes, I wasn't aware you were traveling through Dulles today. What's happened?" Evelyn once again recounted the incident with Brenda Jenkins, her tone factual and devoid of personal animosity, yet leaving no doubt as to the seriousness with which she viewed the gate agent's actions. As she spoke, Henderson's face grew increasingly grim. He cast several pointed, disappointed looks towards Brenda, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. "This is unacceptable, Dr. Hayes. Completely unacceptable." Henderson stammered once Evelyn had finished. "Agent Jenkins, is this account accurate?" Brenda, finding her voice at last, began to stammer a defense. I thought, there have been alerts. I was trying to be diligent." Her excuses sounded hollow, even to her own ears. "Diligent, Agent Jenkins, or discriminatory?" Evelyn interjected coolly. "Because your line of questioning was not standard procedure for any alert I am aware of. It was targeted and unprofessional." Before Henderson could respond, the flight crew arrived Captain Eva Rostova, a tall, composed woman with silver streaks in her blonde hair, and her first officer David Chen. Captain Rostova, known for her calm demeanor and impeccable safety record, surveyed the scene with a practiced eye. Dr. Hayes, Captain Rostova, recognized Evelyn from safety briefings and internal memos. "We were told there was a delay initiated by you. Is there a problem with the aircraft?" Her primary concern was always the machine she was about to command. "Captain Rostova, thank you for coming up," Evelyn said, turning to face her. "At this moment, my concern is not with the aircraft itself, but with the gate procedures and the environment of professionalism, or lack thereof, that I've just experienced. If security and passenger handling protocols are being flouted this openly, it raises questions about overall diligence, which, as you know, is a cornerstone of aviation safety." Captain Rostova listened intently as Evelyn briefly summarized the encounter with Brenda. The captain's expression hardened. She had little tolerance for unprofessionalism, especially when it touched on aspects that could even tangentially affect the safety bubble around her flight. "I see." Captain Rostova said, her gaze shifting to Brenda Jenkins, who visibly flinched. "That is indeed troubling. A compromised or distracted ground team is a link in the chain we cannot afford to be weak." "Exactly," Evelyn agreed. "So before we even discuss the aircraft, I need to be satisfied that this station's operational mindset is where it needs to be. Mr. Henderson, I want to review the gate logs for this flight, all communications and the CCTV footage covering this counter for the past hour." Captain Rostova, First Officer Chen. "I'd appreciate your presence as I do so. Your perspective on how gate operations should interface with flight crew is invaluable." Henderson nodded quickly. "Of course, Dr. Hayes. Right this way. Tim, please handle passenger announcements. Inform them we are conducting a thorough safety review and will update them within 30 minutes. Brenda Jenkins watched them go. Dr. Hayes, Captain Rostova. First Officer Chen and her manager, Mr. Henderson, disappearing into the small office behind the gate counter. She was left alone in the fishbowl of the boarding area, the accusing stares of delayed passengers burning into her. The weight of what she had done, the sheer magnitude of her misjudgment, began to crash down upon her with the force of a runaway jet. She had questioned a passenger. She had profiled a black woman. And that woman had turned out to be the ultimate authority on safety for the entire airline. Inside the cramped office, Evelyn was already directing Henderson to pull up the CCTV footage. The atmosphere was tense. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a grim determination on Evelyn's part, and a dawning realization among the others of just how serious this was. This wasn't just about one rude gate agent anymore. It was about the culture of global air, and Evelyn Hayes was about to put it under a microscope. The fate of GA303, and potentially Brenda Jenkins's career, hung precariously in the balance. But for Evelyn, the stakes were always higher, the safety of every single passenger and crew member who flew global air. The small office behind Gate B42 was suddenly the nucleus of a rapidly escalating situation. Mr. Henderson, visibly sweating, despite the cool air conditioning, brought up the CCTV footage on a monitor. Evelyn, Captain Rostova, and First Officer Chen gathered around, watching the events of the past hour unfold in grainy, silent playback. The footage was damningly clear. It showed Evelyn's calm approach, Brenda Jenkins's dismissive gestures, her increasingly agitated demeanor, and Evelyn's steadfast composure. It captured the expressions of the other passengers, the subtle shifts in body language that spoke volumes. "Freeze it there," Evelyn instructed, pointing to the moment Brenda picked up the internal phone. "Mr. Henderson, what is the standard procedure if an agent has a genuine security concern about a passenger's documentation during boarding?" Henderson cleared his throat. "The agent is to discreetly notify a supervisor or airport security. They are not to engage in prolonged questioning or make a public scene. If there's a doubt about airline employment, there's a specific verification channel through HR usually handled away from the immediate boarding area to avoid, well, this." He gestured vaguely at the screen, then at the still chaotic scene outside the office door. "And was any supervisor called before I identified myself, other than her vague gesture towards that phone?" Evelyn pressed. "No, Dr. Hayes. It appears Agent Jenkins took it upon herself to investigate." Henderson's voice was laced with frustration, directed at his errant employee. Captain Rostova spoke, her arms crossed. "From a flight crew perspective, any unusual activity at the gate, any sign of non-standard procedure makes us uneasy. We rely on the ground team to be the first line of defense, meticulous and professional. If that's compromised, it erodes confidence. Who's to say what else gets overlooked if the basics are fumbled this badly?" First Officer Chen nodded in agreement. "If an agent is making assumptions based on appearances rather than procedure, what other assumptions are being made about baggage screening, passenger counts? Final checks." Evelyn looked at them. "Precisely. This isn't just about Agent Jenkins's rudeness, though that itself is a problem. It's about a potential breakdown in the safety culture. An agent who feels empowered to act this far outside of protocol, potentially driven by bias, is a red flag for the entire system." She turned back to Henderson. "I want to see Agent Jenkins's training records, any previous complaints or commendations, and the station's recent performance metrics on passenger processing and security compliance." Henderson paled slightly. "Dr. Hayes, that will take some time to collate." "Then we have time," Evelyn stated calmly. "Flight GA303 is not going anywhere until I am satisfied. Captain Rostova." "I understand this impacts your schedule and that of your crew, and I apologize for that. But I believe this is critical." "No apology necessary, Dr. Hayes," Captain Rostova replied firmly. "Safety first. Always. We'll wait. If there's a systemic issue here, I want it found and fixed as much as you do. My passengers' lives and my crew's depend on everyone in this chain doing their job flawlessly." While Henderson began making calls to gather the requested documentation, Evelyn initiated another call, this time to Dr. Aris Thorne, head of Global Air's Human Resources and a close confidant on ethical matters within the company. She quickly briefed him on the situation, emphasizing the need for a swift but fair investigation into Brenda Jenkins' conduct, focusing on potential bias and procedural violations. Aris, known for his no-nonsense approach to employee misconduct, assured Evelyn he would personally oversee it. An hour bled into 2. Passengers were becoming increasingly restless. Tim, the junior gate agent, was doing his best, providing bottled water and generic apologies, but the lack of concrete information was fueling frustration. Social media was beginning to light up with disgruntled posts about a mystery delay for Global Air Flight GA303 at Dulles. Inside the office, a picture was forming. Brenda Jenkins had a mixed record, generally competent in her duties, but with a few minor notes about customer service abrasiveness, and one informal warning about an argument with a passenger of Middle Eastern descent 6 months prior, which had been smoothed over by Henderson at the time, with an apology and a flight voucher for the aggrieved customer. There were no commendations for exceptional service. This previous incident, Evelyn mused, pointing to the note on the file Henderson had produced. It was deemed minor. Henderson shifted uncomfortably. At the time, it seemed like a misunderstanding. Agent Jenkins claimed the passenger was being uncooperative with baggage queries. We de-escalated it. De-escalated or swept under the rug? Evelyn's question hung in the air. This is pattern behavior, Mr. Henderson, not an isolated incident. And this time, it was directed at your director of safety. The implications were stark. If Jenkins had a history, however minor, of biased or confrontational behavior that wasn't properly addressed, it pointed to a supervisory failure as well. Henderson visibly swallowed. Evelyn wasn't just assessing Brenda anymore. She was assessing Henderson's management, and by extension, the health of Global Air's ground operations at a major hub. All right, Evelyn said after reviewing the preliminary documents. Mr. Henderson, I want Agent Jenkins placed on immediate administrative leave, pending a full HR investigation, which Dr. Aris Thorne will be overseeing. She is not to have any further contact with passengers or airline systems. Henderson nodded, relieved to have a clear directive, though grim about its implications. Understood, Dr. Hayes. Captain Rostova, First Officer Chen, Evelyn continued. Thank you for your patience and input. While this gate incident is deeply concerning, I have no immediate reason based on what we've reviewed so far regarding the gate itself to believe the aircraft's specific airworthiness is compromised by this particular issue alone. However, this entire episode has highlighted a potential for laxity that I find disturbing. She paused, her brow furrowed in thought. Something still felt off, a nagging intuition she couldn't quite shake. The initial trigger for grounding the flight was Brenda's behavior signifying a potential rot in procedural discipline. But was that all? Before I make a final decision on releasing this flight, Evelyn announced, making a pivotal choice. I want one more thing. Given that my original purpose for this trip was a safety audit at SFO, and considering the questions this incident raises about adherence to standards across the board, I want to perform a spot check. A specific one. I want the Dulles maintenance logs for this specific aircraft N407GA for the last 72 hours. And I want to speak to the lead mechanic who signed off on its last pre-flight check here at Dulles. Captain Rostova raised an eyebrow, surprised but understanding. You suspect something with the plane itself, Dr. Hayes, stemming from this, let's call it an abundance of caution, Captain, Evelyn replied. If standards are slipping at the gate to this degree, I need to be doubly sure they aren't slipping where it matters most, on the aircraft itself. My audit in SFO is about proactive safety systems, like our new AeroSafe predictive maintenance suite. But this situation here demands a look at the reactive day-to-day fundamentals. Consider it a stress test of the system prompted by Agent Jenkins' unprofessionalism. Henderson, looking even more stressed, made another call. The delay for GA303 was about to get longer, and the investigation was about to take an unexpected and potentially far more critical turn. Evelyn's gut feeling, honed by years of experience with complex systems where one small error could cascade into disaster, told her this was necessary. The passengers wouldn't like it. The airline bean counters would be furious. But safety was non-negotiable. The ripples from Brenda Jenkins's biased assumptions were now spreading far beyond Gate B42, deep into the operational heart of global air. The request for the maintenance logs for aircraft N407GA and Airbus A3201neo sent a fresh wave of urgency through the Global Air Operations Center at Dulles. While Mr. Henderson coordinated this, Evelyn, Captain Rostova, and First Officer Chen remained in the gate office, the atmosphere thick with unspoken tension. The flight was now officially delayed by over 3 hours. Passengers had been offered meal vouchers, and some were being rebooked on later flights where possible. But many remained, their frustration mounting. A senior maintenance technician, a man named Alistair Finch with grease ingrained in the lines on his hands and a weary but competent look in his eyes, arrived with a tablet displaying the e-logs. He seemed slightly defensive, clearly aware that the Director of Aviation Safety herself was scrutinizing his team's work. "Dr. Hayes," he began. N407GA had its routine A-check 2 days ago and a full pre-flight inspection this morning, as per protocol. No anomalies reported. All systems green. Evelyn nodded. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Finch. I appreciate your diligence. I'd like to review the detailed readouts from the pre-flight, specifically the sensor data for the hydraulic systems and the actuator responses on the flight control surfaces." Finch, slightly surprised by the specificity of the request from someone usually concerned with overarching policy, navigated through the logs. "Here are the hydraulic pressure readings, all within optimal parameters. And here, the actuator tests for ailerons, elevators, and rudder. All nominal." Evelyn leaned closer to the screen, her eyes scanning the columns of figures and graphs. Captain Rostova and First Officer Chen looked on, their trained eyes also searching for anything out of the ordinary. For several long minutes, the only sound was the quiet hum of the computer and Finch's occasional finger taps on the screen. Then Evelyn paused. "Mr. Finch, this reading here for the port side slat actuator. The response time is documented as 2.85 seconds. What's the acceptable tolerance range?" Finch zoomed in. "For the A3201neo, it's typically between 0.7 and 0.9 seconds under normal ground test conditions. So 0. 85 is within spec, though it's at the higher end of the acceptable range." "And what was its reading at the A-check 2 days ago?" Evelyn asked. Finch cross-referenced. Here it is. It was 0.72 seconds then." Evelyn looked up from the tablet, her gaze sharp. "So in 2 days and approximately, how many flight cycles?" "Let me check," Finch typed quickly. "N407GA has performed 6 flight cycles since that A-check." 6 cycles, Evelyn mused. "And the response time has degraded from 0.72 to 0.85 seconds. As you said, still within tolerance, but a significant change in a short period for a critical component like a leading-edge SAT actuator. Was this flagged for monitoring?" Finch looked a little uneasy. "Well, Dr. Hayes, technically, as it's still within parameters, it wouldn't automatically trigger a flag for immediate monitoring unless it was part of a previously identified issue or a specific directive. It's noted in the logs, but it wouldn't stop dispatch." Captain Rostova interjected. "A degradation like that, even within spec, is something I'd want to know about as captain. Slats are crucial for takeoff and landing performance. An asymmetry in deployment or retraction, or a sluggish response could be problematic, especially in marginal conditions." Evelyn nodded. "Exactly. This is where our AeroSafe Predictive Maintenance Suite, the very system I'm heading to SFO to audit for its rollout, is designed to catch such trends before they approach the limits of tolerance. It would flag this rate of degradation as anomalous even if the current value is acceptable. The human eye, just looking at a single green value, might miss the trend. Mr. Finch, are you telling me no one in your team noted this progression and considered its implications? Finch shifted his weight. We have a high workload, Dr. Hayes. Hundreds of checks, dozens of aircraft. If the computer says it's green, and it's within published limits, we generally move on to the next item, unless there's a pilot report or a specific work order. He sounded defensive, but also honest about the pressures his team faced. This was precisely the kind of systemic gap Evelyn worried about. The reliance on simple green-red indicators without deeper trend analysis could mask developing problems. Brenda Jenkins' behavior had been the catalyst, but this maintenance log detail was now ringing alarm bells of a different, more tangible kind. Mr. Henderson, Evelyn said, her voice firm, I want a physical inspection of that port side slat actuator. Now, I want your best avionics and airframe specialists on it. I want them to check for hydraulic microleaks, electrical signal integrity, and any signs of unusual wear or binding in the mechanism. Henderson, who had hoped this was winding down, looked aghast. Dr. Hayes, that will take hours. We'll have to take the aircraft out of service, possibly move it to a maintenance stand if they need to extend the slats fully and get access panels off. Then that's what you'll do, Evelyn stated unequivocally. This flight is officially grounded, not just suspended but grounded, pending a full mechanical inspection of that system. Passengers will need to be deplaned and reaccommodated. This aircraft is not flying until I have a definitive all clear on that actuator and a satisfactory explanation for its performance degradation. Captain Rostova gave a single decisive nod. I support that decision 100%, Dr. Hayes. I will not fly an aircraft with a potential flight control issue, even a nascent one. First Officer Chen added, Better safe than sorry, ma'am. Much rather be down here wishing we were up there than up there wishing we were down here because of an overlooked detail. The order was given. Passengers still at the gate were informed that GA303 was now officially cancelled due to unforeseen mechanical checks. The collective groan was audible even inside the office. Global Air's social media channels erupted. News outlets started picking up on the unusually long delay and subsequent cancellation of a flight by the airline's own safety director. Evelyn then contacted Marcus Thorne, again updating him on the new development. Marcus, the gate incident with Agent Jenkins may have inadvertently led us to something much more critical. I've found an anomaly in the maintenance logs for N47GA's port slat actuator. I've grounded the aircraft for a full inspection. Thorne, though undoubtedly stressed by the operational and financial nightmare this was becoming, knew better than to question Evelyn's judgment when it came to mechanical safety. Understood, Evelyn. Do what you need to do. The SFO audit can wait. This takes precedence. Keep me informed. I'll have to brief the CEO on this personally. He's not going to be happy about the press this is already generating, but he'll be even less happy if we had an incident. As the maintenance crew at Dulles began the intricate process of inspecting the slat actuator on N407GA, Evelyn felt a grim satisfaction. Her instincts had been right. Brenda Jenkins's appalling behavior, rooted in prejudice, had, through a bizarre chain of events, potentially uncovered a genuine, tangible safety risk that might otherwise have gone unnoticed until it was too late. Meanwhile, Brenda Jenkins, now officially suspended and escorted from the airport premises by a tight-lipped Henderson, sat at home, her phone buzzing with calls from concerned colleagues and messages from her union representative. The initial shock had given way to a nauseating mix of fear and indignation. She still couldn't quite believe that one nosy passenger had turned her life upside down. She felt victimized, convinced she was just doing her job, completely oblivious to the deeper implications of her actions or the more serious issue her prejudice had inadvertently helped to uncover. Her karma, she felt, was an unjust punishment. She had no idea how much deeper it was about to cut. The engineers worked for nearly 3 hours on N407GA. Finally, Alistair Finch returned to the gate office where Evelyn, Captain Rostova, and Henderson were waiting. Finch's face was pale. "Dr. Hayes," he began, his voice strained. "You were right to insist on the physical check. We found it." "Found what, Mr. Finch?" Evelyn asked, her gaze steady. "A hairline fracture in the actuator casing," Finch reported, holding up a small sealed evidence bag containing a metallic component, "and signs of a slow, almost imperceptible hydraulic fluid seep. Not enough to trigger the primary sensors yet, but enough to cause the increased friction and sluggish response time you noted." The fracture was propagating. Under the stresses of several more takeoffs and landings, especially in colder temperatures at altitude or during a high-load deployment, it would have failed, catastrophically. A stunned silence filled the room. Captain Rostova closed her eyes briefly, a flicker of profound relief mixed with horror crossing her face. Henderson looked like he might be sick. A complete, uncontrolled slat failure on one side during a critical phase of flight like takeoff or landing could lead to a loss of control. The implications were terrifying. Hundreds of lives had been unknowingly at risk. Evelyn felt a chill despite the gravity of the discovery. The AeroSafe predictive maintenance suite we're developing would have cross-referenced that rate of degradation with material stress models and flagged it for immediate inspection days ago, she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. This is why we need it." Then focusing on the present, she said, "Mr. Finch, thank you and your team for your thoroughness once directed. This aircraft is obviously remaining grounded. It will need a complete replacement of that actuator and a full inspection of the corresponding unit on the starboard side, along with a fleet-wide advisory to check for similar degradation patterns on all our A3221 and Neos." The news of the critical fault found on GA303, directly because of Dr. Hayes's intervention, which itself was triggered by a gate agent's discriminatory behavior, began to spread like wildfire within Global Air's upper echelons. The story was no longer just about an employee's misconduct. It was about a near-miss disaster, averted by the very person who had been subjected to that misconduct. The hard karma for Brenda Jenkins was already in motion, but the repercussions for Global Air were just beginning to unfold. And for Dr. Evelyn Hayes. It was a stark reminder of why she fought so tirelessly for safety, even when it meant facing down prejudice and upending operations. This time, her principled stand had saved not just her dignity, but potentially hundreds of lives. The confirmed discovery of a propagating hairline fracture in the port side slat actuator of N407GA, a defect with the chilling potential for catastrophic in-flight failure, was more than just a maintenance issue. It was a lightning rod. It illuminated with terrifying clarity the chasm between procedural expectation and on-the-ground reality, and it threw the initial incident with gate agent Brenda Jenkins into an even starker, more damning relief. CEO Miles Thompson, a man whose usual demeanor was a brusque, numbers-driven impatience, found himself staring grimly at the preliminary report on his mahogany desk. The words "imminent catastrophic failure," "loss of control," and "averted by direct intervention of Dr. Hayes following discriminatory gate incident" swam before his eyes. The usual bluster drained from him, replaced by a cold dread and the dawning realization that Global Air had narrowly, almost miraculously, sidestepped a disaster that would have obliterated the airline. Marcus Thorne, VP of Operations, sat opposite him, looking equally grave. "The FAA has been notified, of course," Thorne said, his voice low. "They're launching their own inquiry, but preliminarily, they're commending Dr. Hayes's actions and our transparency once the fault was found. The real heat, Miles, is internal and public right now." Thompson nodded slowly. "The press is already calling it the Gate B-42 miracle. Some are praising Hayes as a hero. Others are crucifying us for the initial profiling and for nearly letting a compromised aircraft fly. We're walking a tightrope over a canyon of fire." Brenda Jenkins. The unraveling of a career. For Brenda Jenkins, the world had tilted on its axis. The initial suspension had felt like a gross overreaction, a temporary blip she could fight with the union's backing. But when the news of the critical mechanical fault, a fault found only because of the delay she had triggered through her confrontation with Dr. Hayes, became known internally, her situation became untenable. Her union representative, a seasoned but weary man named Frank Doyle, met with her. "Brenda." He began laying out the file HR had compiled. "This isn't good. The CCTV is unequivocal about the procedural breaches. Dr. Hayes's testimony is compelling. And now this aircraft issue. The airline is framing this as your actions almost masking a bigger problem by creating a different one." "But I didn't know about the plane," Brenda cried, genuinely distressed, yet still failing to grasp the core issue of her own behavior. "I was just trying to be careful." She looked, I don't know, out of place in first class. "And she got aggressive when I asked questions," Doyle sighed. "Dr. Hayes's demeanor on the footage is described by everyone else as remarkably calm under provocation." "Brenda, the narrative here is that you profiled a black woman who happened to be a senior executive, and your manager has a prior incident on file where you were counseled for being abrasive with a passenger of color. It's a pattern, and that pattern this time had potentially lethal implications, not because of what you did to the plane, but because your conduct highlights a breakdown in the very professionalism Global Air needs to guarantee safety at every level." The formal termination meeting was brief. Aris Thorne, head of HR, conducted it with a cold clinical precision, flanked by legal counsel. He read the charges: gross misconduct, encompassing discriminatory actions, violation of passenger handling protocols, dereliction of duty and conduct, detrimental to the airline's reputation and operational integrity. He detailed how her actions had not only caused significant disruption, but had also exposed the airline to severe scrutiny. Brenda attempted to interject to offer her version of events, but Aris Thorne cut her off smoothly. "Ms. Jenkins, your opportunity to provide a statement was given during the initial investigation. All relevant materials, including CCTV evidence and multiple witness testimonies, have been reviewed. The decision is final." She was offered a minimal severance contingent on signing a non-disclosure agreement. Frank Doyle advised her to take it. Fighting it would be costly public and almost certainly futile. The hard truth was that her actions, stripped bare of her self-justifications, were indefensible. She had become a liability the airline couldn't afford. In the weeks that followed, Brenda found the doors of other airlines firmly closed. The aviation industry, while vast, is also surprisingly interconnected. Word travels. The circumstances of her departure from Global Air, though officially shrouded in HR speak, were an open secret. The Gate B-42 incident became a quiet legend, and Brenda Jenkins was its primary casualty. Her bitterness grew, but it was a lonely, unproductive emotion. The karma was not just the loss of a job, it was the loss of a career, the stark consequence of unchecked prejudice meeting immovable professionalism. Mr. Henderson, a career derailed David Henderson, the Dulles station manager, faced his own reckoning, albeit a less terminal one. He was summoned to headquarters for a meeting with Marcus Thorne and Iris Thorne. The atmosphere was heavy. "David," Marcus began, his tone more disappointed than angry. "We've reviewed your station's performance, your handling of the previous complaint against Agent Jenkins, and your initial response at Gate B42. Frankly, it's not good enough." Iris Thorne elaborated. "Your failure to adequately address Agent Jenkins's prior conduct, dismissing it as a misunderstanding rather than investigating potential bias, allowed that behavior to fester. It created an environment where such an incident could escalate to the level it did with Dr. Hayes. You are culpable for a failure of oversight, David." Henderson sat rigidly, accepting the criticism. He knew he had downplayed the earlier incident, eager to avoid paperwork and uncomfortable conversations. Now that leniency was coming back to haunt him, he received a formal written letter of reprimand, a serious black mark on his record. He was to attend a mandatory intensive DEI and leadership accountability program, specially designed and overseen by a consulting firm Evelyn had recommended. Furthermore, a deputy station manager for quality and compliance was appointed to the Dulles station, effectively diluting Henderson's direct authority and inserting a layer of oversight he found galling, but couldn't protest. His bonus for the year was forfeit, and his prospects for advancement within Global Air were for the foreseeable future nil. He kept his job, but the message was clear: he was on thin ice, and the old ways of managing difficult situations by smoothing them over were no longer acceptable. Global Air's public gambit and Evelyn's ascendance. The media storm was relentless. CEO Miles Thompson knew he couldn't just issue a press release. He needed a bold, visible move. The decision was made: a full press conference with Dr. Evelyn Hayes front and center. Preparations were intense. PR teams drafted statements, anticipated questions, and coached Thompson. Evelyn, however, required little coaching. She knew her facts, she knew her principles, and she possessed an innate, unshakable composure. The press conference was packed. Thompson, visibly humbled, opened with a direct, unvarnished apology to Dr. Hayes. "The treatment Dr. Hayes endured at the hands of our employee was inexcusable, discriminatory, and represents a betrayal of the values Global Air strives to uphold. For this, on behalf of the entire airline, I offer her our most profound and sincere apologies. The employee in question is no longer with Global Air, and the station management has faced disciplinary action." He then masterfully pivoted a move, clearly orchestrated with Evelyn's quiet input. "But this deeply regrettable incident," Thompson continued, his voice gaining strength, "had an outcome none of us could have predicted. Dr. Hayes, even while being subjected to this unprofessional ordeal, maintained her extraordinary focus on safety. Her decision to suspend the flight, initially based on procedural concerns at the gate, led her to insist on further checks. Those checks, driven by her expertise and unwavering commitment, uncovered a critical mechanical fault in the aircraft, a fault that, if left undetected, could have led to a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Dr. Evelyn Hayes is not just our Director of Aviation Safety. She is a hero. She saved lives that day, not just through her knowledge, but through her courage and integrity in the face of adversity. Thompson then outlined the sweeping changes, the fleet-wide inspections, the immediate multi-million-dollar investment to to fast-track the AeroSafe predictive maintenance suite under Evelyn's direct oversight and the launch of a new comprehensive DEI program, which he pointedly referred to as the Hayes Initiative for Respect and Safety Culture. When Evelyn spoke, her voice was calm, measured, yet resonated with undeniable power. Safety in aviation is not a static achievement. It is a continuous process of vigilance, learning, and improvement. It requires every single person in the chain of responsibility to perform their duties with the highest degree of professionalism and integrity. The incident at Gate B42 demonstrated a lapse in that chain. The subsequent discovery aboard N407GA underscored why there is no room for such lapses. She didn't dwell on her personal mistreatment. Instead, she focused on the systemic lessons. The AeroSafe system, which we are now accelerating, is designed to use advanced analytics to predict and prevent mechanical issues before they reach critical stages. It represents the future of aviation safety. Similarly, the Hayes Initiative will embed principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion deep within our operational DNA, ensuring that respect and professionalism are not just buzzwords, but lived realities at Global Air. This airline has a profound responsibility to its passengers and its employees. We will learn from this. We will be better. We will be safer. Her performance was a masterclass. She had turned a moment of personal humiliation into a powerful platform for systemic change. The media narrative began to shift from airline's shame to airline's redemption, led by visionary safety chief. Global Air's stock, after its initial dip, began to slowly recover as investors saw not just a crisis but a credible plan for addressing it. The seeds of change, implementation, and impact. In the months that followed, Evelyn found herself with unprecedented authority and resources. The rollout of the AeroSafe predictive maintenance suite became her flagship project. She assembled a dedicated team of engineers, data scientists, and software developers. Early results were astonishing. Within 6 months, the system analyzing terabytes of flight data flagged 17 potential Type 2 anomalies across the fleet. Issues that, like the slat actuator on N47GA, were degrading but still within current, acceptable tolerances. Proactive maintenance based on these predictions prevented at least 3 unscheduled groundings, and in one instance identified a faulty turbine blade sensor that could have led to an engine shutdown. The cost savings from preventing just one major in-flight incident or AOG aircraft on ground situation far outweighed the investment in AeroSafe. The DEI training, dubbed the Hayes Initiative by popular acclaim within the company, a name Evelyn privately found a bit overwhelming but publicly accepted as a symbol of the needed change, was far more than a typical tick-box exercise. It involved immersive workshops, scenario-based learning, and difficult conversations about unconscious bias, privilege, and respectful workplace conduct. Captain Rostova became a vocal champion, sharing her first-hand account of the Gate B42 incident in pilot training sessions, emphasizing how a lapse in professionalism anywhere could impact safety everywhere. Even Mr. Henderson, initially resistant, found himself genuinely re-evaluating his past approaches after attending the Intensive Leadership Accountability Program. There was grumbling from some long-tenured employees resistant to change, but the CEO's backing was absolute, and Evelyn's moral authority on the issue was unassailable. The Safety Culture Assurance Program, with its confidential reporting line directly to Evelyn's office, also began to bear fruit. Employees feeling genuinely empowered started reporting minor procedural deviations, safety concerns, and even instances of unprofessional conduct they might have previously ignored. Each report was meticulously investigated, leading to small but significant improvements across the airline. It fostered a sense that safety and respect were truly everyone's responsibility. Dr. Evelyn Hayes became more than just an executive. She became the conscience of global air. Her days were long filled with strategic meetings, technical reviews, and mentoring sessions. The SFO audit, when it finally happened months later, was almost an afterthought, though she conducted it with her usual meticulousness. The real audit had already occurred, its findings etched into the airline's recent history. She never forgot the humiliation at Gate B42, the casual dismissal in Brenda Jenkins' eyes. But that memory no longer stung with personal injury alone. It served as a constant fuel for her mission. The hard karma that had befallen Brenda Jenkins was a necessary consequence, but the true victory lay in the systemic changes born from that ugly moment, changes that promised a safer, more respectful journey for countless others. Global Air, scarred but smarter, was slowly transforming, all because one black woman, a brilliant engineer, had refused to be silenced or sidelined, instead using her power to hold a mirror up to the organization and demand it be better. And in doing so, she hadn't just grounded a flight. She had elevated an entire airline. Narrator Dr. Evelyn Hayes didn't just challenge one person's prejudice. She challenged an entire system. The fallout from that day at Dulles was immense. Brenda Jenkins faced the direct consequences of her actions, a hard lesson in accountability. But more importantly, Global Air was forced into a period of intense self-reflection and sweeping reforms, ultimately making their operations safer for everyone. The Hayes Protocol and the accelerated adoption of the AeroSafe predictive maintenance suite became benchmarks in the industry. It's a stark reminder that one person standing firm in their integrity and expertise can indeed move mountains, or in this case, ground flights, and save lives. The next time you see someone being unfairly challenged, remember Dr. Hayes. What do you think of her actions? Let us know in the comments below. Narrator CTA. If this story of courage, consequence, and hard karma resonated with you, please hit that like button. It really helps our channel. Share this video with others who appreciate stories of justice and resilience. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into compelling real-world dramas. Thanks for watching and fly safe.